Jai Sadgurudeo, everyone. Welcome to the weekly Satsang organized by North America Institute of Vihangam Yoga. My name is Srirang and I have joined this Satsang from Cary, North Carolina. So, first of all, I would like to congratulate each one of you for sparing some time from your busy lives to fulfill the needs of our soul. Because, nowadays we have been so busy fulfilling our physical and mental needs in this world. So, it is a first step towards, making spiritual progress by attending the satsang. So, we will begin this satsang, but before that, I would like to offer my prayers at the holy feet of Lord Sadgurudeo. So, I request all of you to close the eyes and just stay focused on the prayers. बार बार वंदन करूं सदगुरुदेव हमार, यहाँ वहाँ सब ठाम में महिमा अपरंपार। शरण शरण मैं शरण हूँ, हे गुरु बंदी छोर। मोहे उबारो हे गुरु, यह 100 बार निहो। So again, welcome back to the satsang. So we will continue discussion of Swarved Duhas. We are actually going to continue from last week's couplet because, as we know, it described 4 eternal entities, and it's a very deep and vast topic. So we will be continuing with last week's couplet even today. We all know that Swarved is considered to be encyclopedia of spirituality. It was written by Sadguru Sadafal Devji Maharaj in his conscious state of samadhi. He has written his spiritual experiences in the conscious samadhi, and that is why this is a very important scripture for all Vihangam yogis. It is each disciple's responsibility, or in fact a duty, I would say, to read and understand Swarved. And through this Swarved Gyan series, we are trying to make it easy for all of us to get associated with the Swarved and understand various couplets. So today we have very experienced and knowledgeable disciple of Sadgurudev who has been, helping us understand Swarved couplets for, past few weeks, whose name is Sudhanshuji. He is a very dedicated disciple, and we have seen his dedication, in seva and satsang, throughout. So without further delay, I would hand it over to Sudhanshuji. Over to you, Sudhanshuji.
Thank you very much, Srirangji, for giving me this opportunity. Before starting, I'll put my prayers in the lotus feet of Sadgurudeo. Saran sharan मैं शरण हूँ, हे गुरु बंदी छोड़। मोहे उबारो हे गुरु, यह 100 बार निहोर। जनाधीन वंदन करूं, केहि विधि की जैसेव। वार पार की गम नहीं, नमो नमो गुरुदेव। I'm bowing down in the lotus feet of Sadgurudev Bhagwan, in the lotus feet of Sadguru Pad Uttaradhikari, Sant Pravar Sri Vigyan Dev Ji Maharaj, अंतर्राष्ट्रीय संत श्री नामदेव जी महाराज, परम पूजनीय माता जी, entire आचार्य परिवार, and I welcome to all the disciple of Sadgurudeo Bhagwan and all the spiritual seeker who joined this session to learn about different spiritual, you can say, divine things, divine concepts, which Swamiji has explained in this book, which we all say as Swarved. Swarved, which is the encyclopedia of spirituality. Swarved, which contains answer of each and every question of the spiritual world. So to discuss one of the couplets of that divine book, we all gathered here today. We will continue the same discussion which we all were having last week. Before proceeding ahead, I'll request any one of you to please come forward and read this couplet in front of us, and then we will go ahead with the discussion. Anyone, please come forward and read this couplet.
Yes, Sadgurudeo, Sudhanshu, I can read it.
Ji, please go ahead.
एक सकल अस्कंभ है, एक चलावन हार, बुद्ध मुक्त तत्व एक है, एक छोड़ावन हार.
Thank you very much, Niranji, for reading this couplet. So, in our last week discussion, we talked about 6 eternal entity about which Swamiji has mentioned in Swarved. Eternal entity is the entity which neither takes birth nor die. What it means? The entity which is present in all the form of time or beyond it, which is always present, that is eternal, which never die, that is eternal. So there are 6 eternal entities Swamiji has mentioned in Swarved. Now, in this couplet, Swamiji has mentioned about 4 conscious entity. 4 conscious entity which is eternal in nature. What it means? There are 6 eternal entity. Out of those 6 eternal entity, there are 4 entities which are conscious in nature. And Swamiji has mentioned about those 4 conscious entity in this couplet. So last week we discussed about first 2 entity. The first one, which is Ek Sakal Asakambha hai, means the one who's the skambha of this entire creation, who behold this entire creation, who is behind this entire creation, whom we call as Param Purush, whom we call as Almighty. So that is Sakala Skambha, that is first conscious entity. What is the second conscious entity? We discussed about Chalavanahar. Who is Chalavanahar? The one who is regulating this entire creation, who is behind the creation of this entire universe, and that entity is Akshara Brahma. So that is the second eternal and conscious entity. And we discussed in very detail about these 2 entities in our last week satsang. This week we will cover the other 2 entities about which Swamiji has mentioned in this couplet. So about third entity, Swamiji has said, Baddha Mukta Tattva Eka hai. So the third entity is the one who is in the 2 states. Either that entity is in the Baddha state or he is in the Mukta state. So either the entity is in the state of bondage or in the state of freedom from all these bondages, or is Mukta. So what is that entity about which Swamiji is mentioning here? Swamiji is mentioning here about soul, about Jivatma. So soul is the third entity which is eternal in nature as well as conscious in nature. Soul is a conscious entity. Soul can react by itself. Soul can act by itself. It doesn't need any other entity to act. So that's why it is a conscious entity. It has its own consciousness. So Swamiji has mentioned that soul has its own consciousness. Along with that, what is the properties of soul? We discussed the properties of Sakalaskamba. We discussed the property of Chalavanhar. Now, let's discuss what is the properties of soul. So Swamiji has mentioned that there are three basic properties or qualities within soul. What are those? Gyan, Ichha or Prayatna. In English, if we say Gyan means knowledge, so that is the first property. Ichha means desire, that is the second property. And Prayatna means effort, that is the third property. Jnana, Ichha or Prayatna. Knowledge, desire and effort. Those are the three property in its purest form. When the soul is in purest form, soul is not in a bondage, soul is not covered with ignorance. On that state, soul has these three basic properties. What happens when soul come into Baddha state? When soul comes into the state where it is in the bandhan, it is in the bondage. On that state, soul acquires two more property when soul comes into the Prakriti. What are those two property? Those are suffering and resentment. So those two are not original property of soul. Those two property comes in soul when it comes into this Prakriti, when soul comes into the state of bondage. So that is the quality, that is the property of soul. And at one particular time, soul can be in one of these states, either in the Baddha state, either in the state of bondage, or in the state of the freedom. Now, when we are talking about Baddha and Mukta, the state of bondage and the state of salvation, it is very important to understand what is the meaning of stage of bondage. What is the bondage in which soul resides? So, if I cover it in a brief, we can understand it that how soul comes to the state of bondage. There is not a single type of bondage in which soul resides. So when soul remains in its purest form, soul is in the state where he is in the form of Hansa Avastha, where he is, free from all bondages. In the state of salvation, soul is united with the Supreme Soul. That is its purest form, right? So how soul move from there? So the first first change in state happens when the first bondage comes into the soul. What is that first bondage? So that is the bondage of ignorance. And that is the reason when soul comes down from its purest form. So Swamiji has mentioned in Swarved, कर्मन की अज्ञान की जड़ चेतन की ग्रंथि बंधन में सब जीव हैं तीन प्रकार की ग्रंथि. So Swamiji has mentioned that the soul who remains in the stage of bondage or in the state of freedom, in the state of salvation, so in the stage of bondage there are three type of bondages which covers the soul. And out of those three, the first bondage is the bondage of ignorance. When soul have the wrong knowledge, you can say. The ignorance means it's the wrong information. Soul have the knowledge at that moment, but it's a wrong information. And that's the bondage of ignorance. With this bondage, soul further came down to the came down and acquired different kind of bodies. We have discussed this in our previous satsang that there are 6 type of bodies which soul acquires when it comes from the state of salvation to the state of bondage in the prakriti. And we all know that it starts from the ignorance. So the first bondage that happens there, that is the bondage of agyanta. That's the bondage of ignorance. And what is that ignorance? The ignorance is, I am the whole and soul of this creation. I am the reason behind this bliss which I am experiencing. Aham Brahmasmi. When this ignorance happens within the soul, then that is the reason when he fall down from its state of mukti, from its state of salvation. So that at that particular point, the first bondage which acquires a soul, and that is the bondage of ignorance. And when further downgradation happen in the state of soul, and when soul enters into the prakriti, then the second bondage happens at that point of time. And what is that? That is the second granthi, which Swamiji has mentioned, Jada Chetan ki granthi. What it means? When soul comes into the zone of Prakriti, at that particular time, the Chetan soul, the conscious soul, connects with the inert Prakriti. And that time, the not which creates, Swamiji is saying that as a Jada Chetan ki granthi. So that is the bondage of a conscious and inert entity. So that is the second bondage. And further, when soul acquires the body, then the third bondage happens. And what is that? That is the karmaniki, the bondage of our karmas, what we perform. So a soul comes down from the state of a mukta state, which is one of the state, to the state of baddha state, which is the another state. And when a soul is going from a mukta state to a baddha state, three kind of bondages covers the soul. And when we see the journey of going back from baddha to mukta, on that time, soul needs the fourth eternal and conscious entity which Swamiji has mentioned here in this couplet. Only in the presence of that entity, soul can again go back from its baddha state to mukta state. So now let's come to the fourth entity about which I'm saying that, or Swamiji is saying that entity is Chudavanahar. What is the meaning of Chudavanahar? Chudavanahar means the one who bestows liberation, who liberates you. Liberation from what? Liberation from your bandhan, the state where you are in the confinement. So the fourth entity is the one who can liberate you from the state of your confinement. And which is that entity? That entity is Sadguru, the eternal Sadguru, the eternal master. And that is the one who is Chudavanahar. So who is Chudavanahar? Who is Sadguru? About Sadguru, Swamiji has mentioned in Swarved, Param Purusha Agya Chale, Charo Yug Sansar, प्रकट भेद उपदेश है अज सदगुरु तत्सार. That itself defines who is Sadguru, how he spread the knowledge, the spiritual knowledge, and in which state he spreads that. All this explanation covers in that one single couplet. So Sadguru is the one, the eternal Sadguru is the one who spread this knowledge with the direction of Sakala Skamba, with the direction of Param Purush, with the direction of Almighty. That's why Swamiji is saying Param Purusha Agya Chale. Charo Yuga Sansar. What it means? He is present in all four yugas. So he is always present. The Sadguru is the eternal entity who is always present to spread this knowledge. So how he spread this knowledge? Prakat Bheda Upadesh hai. It means, so either in his evident form or in his hidden form. Either in his prakat, right? When he is evident in front of the disciple, or gupta. What it means? In his hidden form, he always provides the knowledge. So the fourth entity, the Chudavanahar, the Sadgurudeo, who either in his present form or in evident form is always present from the start of the creation. And why Sadguru is important, we can definitely try to understand that at the level of our intellect. So when we were discussing about three types of bondage in which a soul comes, right? When he degrades from the state of mukti, state of salvation, when it comes down, then the very first type of bondage what we discussed, that was the bondage of ignorance. So if we understand this entire reason behind this confinement, the reason behind this, the baddha state, the confined state of soul is ignorance. That is the prime and basic cause. So how you will come out from that ignorance? You will come out from that ignorance when someone will provide you the light of the knowledge. Unless the light of knowledge will appear in front of you, the darkness of ignorance will not go away. So who is the owner of that light of the knowledge? So the owner is Chudavanahar. The owner is Sadguru. He is the one who owns the entire spiritual world. He is the one who acquired the knowledge, the light of the knowledge. That's why Swamiji has written in Swarved, Maya lok छुड़ाए कर चेतन लोक निवास सदगुरुता को जानिए bhakti mukti jehi paas. So he is the one who has the capacity to liberate you from Maya lok to Chetan lok. It means from the lok of Prakriti, from the place of Prakriti to your own place from where you came. So he is the one who have the capacity to liberate you from your physical zone to your liberation zone. So it is not the case that Almighty is not present in front of soul. It is not that bliss is not around you. But a soul cannot experience the bliss. Why it cannot experience the bliss? Because of ignorance. And that is the reason when soul fall down from the state of Hans Avastha to the state of Sthul Sarir, when he degrades from those six state, soul cannot go backward from in between, right? It's not that soul is falling down from state of Hansavastha to Kaivalya, Mahakaran, Karan, and in between it get back. No, why it doesn't happens? Because the ignorance which is within the soul, that cannot go away. And at that particular state, soul is not in the shelter of Sadguru, who can remove this ignorance from the soul. As the Chudavanhar is not there, there is no option for the soul except falling down, because he is in the state of ignorance. And as a soul is in the state of ignorance, there is only one who can liberate it, or who can free it from that particular state. So a supreme soul is always there, Almighty is always there, his bliss is always there. But a soul is in ignorance, so he cannot experience that. That's why Swamiji has written in Swarved, Parameshwar Jiva Saath hai, Amit Kaal gaye bhi. So the Almighty is always with the soul, but जीव त्रिताप छूटा नहीं बिन सदगुरु महप्रीत. But a soul cannot liberate itself. Why? Because even Almighty is with the soul, but soul has not the knowledge of experiencing it. Soul is in the ignorance. And that's why even if Almighty is with the soul, to experience that eternal entity, soul needs Sadguru, who removes the ignorance from the soul, and under the shelter of Sadguru, soul can experience the Almighty. So, bin Sadguru छूटे नहीं, बिन जीव त्रिताप छूटे नहीं, बिन Sadguru Mahapreet. So, Sadguru is that Chudavanhar who liberates you from the bondages. Now, the question is, when I was talking about the Chudavanhar, I mentioned that Sadguru is always present from the very beginning, either in its evident form or in the hidden form. So, what it means? It means is, like in the present time, Sadguru is in his evident form. We all can see him, we all can take his darshan, we all can hear his Amritvani. He is in his evident form. What is hidden form? When Sadgurudev is not present physically in this earth, still at that time, the seeker who is practicing the path of spirituality, how he proceed ahead? He proceed ahead at that time under the guidance of Sadguru, who who always guide him in his hidden form. So Sadguru can be present either in his hidden form or in his evident form, but he will be there all the time. Even on his evident form, Swamiji has mentioned in Swarved that there are four different, you can say, in four different types Sadguru incarnates on this earth. Swamiji has mentioned Nityanadi Sadguru, Swayam Shuddha Sadguru, Abhyas Siddha Sadguru, or Parampara Sadguru. These four types he mentioned. But in all these four forms, the same eternal power of Chudavanhar flows. It is the same entity who incarnates in these four forms when we talked about the evident form of Sadguru. So, even in the evident form, when we talk about the Abhyasiddha Sadguru or the Parampara Sadguru, so we talked about that under the shelter of Nityanadi Sadguru, Sadguru Sadafal Devji Maharaj has practiced 17 long years of meditation, and under his guidance, he acquired the position of Sadguru. So, what is the reason behind that explanation? The reason behind that is the fourth entity is eternal in nature. We cannot confine it under one body, or we can say that, okay, Sadgurudev has taken birth at this year and he left his body at this particular year. It means that eternal entity is only limited to that particular time duration. No. The energy of Sadguru is not confined in a body. But whoever acquires that post, whoever acquires that Sadguru Pada, that cannot acquire by themselves. Swamiji has mentioned, Aj Guru ki chhaya pare, Sadguru Pada adhikar, Vidya padh Guru nahi bane, Maha katin vyavahar. So, the eternal master selects the super elevated soul to spread his knowledge, and he himself gives the Sadguru Pad to that super elevated soul. And when he comes in his evident form, he spread the knowledge and he liberates so many souls from the bondage of life and death. So that's the glory of fourth eternal and conscious entity Chudavanhar. That's the glory of Sadguru. And that explains how Chudavanhar, how Sadguru is important for the third conscious entity soul to go from the state of Badh to Mukt, from the status of bondage to the state of salvation. And that is the reason, because of this glory of Sadguru, Swamiji has mentioned in Swarved, Prema Bhakti, Sadguru Karo, Sadguru Alakh Alakh Hai. Pratham Milan Guru, Phir Prabhu, Janma Maran Dukh Paye. So, do the bhakti of Sadguru. That's what Swamiji is mentioning in Swarved. Why? Because Sadguru Alakh Alakh Hai. Sadguru is the one who will show you or who will bestow you the Almighty. Prathama Milan Guru Phir Prabhu. So, the first you have to meet the Master, then only you can meet the Almighty. And once you will meet the Almighty, then the Janma Maran bondage will go away and you will free from that confinement. So that is the glory of Chudavanhar, and that was the explanation of Baddha Mukta Tattva, soul, that we call it as Jeev. During this explanation, if I did some mistake, I'm sorry for that. We can proceed ahead with if someone want to say something or someone want to ask something, please come forward and share your views. Thank you very much from my side. Boli Swarved Bhavan ki jai.
Jai. Thank you, Sudhanshuji, for very detailed and wonderful explanation, explaining the difference between a Jivatma and Sadguru. This was very helpful with a lot of dohas from Swarved, which exactly explained, gave more details about each tattva. So really appreciate walking us through this couplet. So we will now open this forum for questions. Please unmute yourself and ask any questions if you may have on this couplet.
Jai Sadgurudeo. Thank you very much
Yes,
for a beautiful explanation. One question I've had in mind for some time. You mentioned that when in the six bodies, the Paramatma is always present in all the six bodies, all the way. Of course, in the Hansavastha, the Atma is in union with the Paramatma, but in all the other Sharirs and Avastha, Paramatma is always there. And but Sadguru only comes in touch with the soul when the soul finds him or the Sadguru finds him. Is that correct? Or even the Sadguru is with the soul during that entire journey?
Thank you, Narayanji. So, Sadguru is not with the soul when soul is in the mukta state, and that is the reason that when a soul comes in the state of ignorance, it keeps falling to all those six bodies. We can understand it this way as well, that if Sadguru will be there, then there is no scope of ignorance, right? And as Sadguru is not present there when soul unites with the Supreme Soul, so at that time soul is experiencing the ultimate bliss of that Almighty, right? At the union, at that particular point, there is only soul and Supreme Soul. And when the ignorance comes at that particular point and a soul fall from there, so at that particular moment, if Sadguru will be there, then the ignorance will not be present at that moment, right? And soul is not looking for Sadguru as well, right? Why it a soul is not looking for Sadguru because he is in the ignorant state that I am the, I am Aham Brahmasmi. I am the one who is the reason behind this bliss. And it fall down. Now, the first part was like Parameshwar Jiva Saath is Almighty always present with the soul. Yes, it always present with the soul, but the problem is soul is not experiencing that bliss. But it doesn't mean that soul is not in search of that bliss. As we all know from Swarved, that soul have the property, or you can say soul is the entity which is eternal in nature and which is conscious in nature. Almighty is eternal in nature, conscious in nature, as well as what is the third entity? That is bliss. So Supreme Soul is the, you can say, he is the one who is the bliss, right? So that's why we call it as a Satchidananda, Sat plus Chit plus Ananda. What means? That eternal plus conscious plus bliss. That's why we call it as a Satchidananda. So a soul have Sat plus Chit, eternality plus consciousness. But soul doesn't have bliss within itself. And that's the reason, even when soul comes in the state of bondage, it always looks for that third entity, that is bliss. But due to ignorance, soul have no idea that the source of bliss is Supreme Soul. So on that ignorant state, what happens? When we take birth, we are in the ignorant state, but we are in the search of bliss. And we are searching that bliss in different subjects and different objects of this Prakriti. Right? From our childhood, we look that happiness, that bliss in sweets, chocolates, toys. When we grow up, we look that happiness, that bliss in job, money, family, and whatnot. So as our life passes away, our soul internally is in search of bliss. But the problem is, due to our ignorance, we are looking for that bliss in different worldly thing. And what is the irony? That once we acquire that thing, we experience that this is not the you can say source of bliss, and we start looking for something else. That's what happened with us, right? We see happiness on anything until unless that thing is not with us. As that thing comes with us, we start looking for happiness in something else. And that's how this life goes until Sadguru comes in your life. When Sadguru comes in your life, then what he does? He removes the layer of ignorance. And when he removes the layer of ignorance, then a soul understands that the source of bliss which I'm searching from beginning, that source is something else. That source is not in Prakriti. That's why in Bhajan or in Swarved, so many places it is written, right? Surati ulati avalokaji tohi piva milenge. What it means? Just change the direction of your consciousness and see. What do you mean by change the direction of consciousness? From this Prakriti to that Almighty. Change the direction and see, then what you will experience. Tohi piva milenge. You will experience the bliss of that eternal master, that eternal entity, under the guidance of that master. So this is what my view is. Thank you very much, Niranjanji.
Thank you very much, Sudhanshu. Yeah, I'll let if anybody else has any questions.
So Sudhanshu, actually, I have a question. So we have heard that, even Sadhguru's consciousness is everywhere, right? So, even though soul may not be experiencing it, or, may not be realizing that the presence of Sadhguru, I am I wrong in thinking that, the Sadhguru's consciousness also exist, in the 3/4 region, or in the bliss, right? Eternal bliss.
Yes, correct. So, in Swarved, Swamiji has mentioned that the the mandal of Sadguru is in between the mandal of Akshara and Parabrahma, right? So that's where the Sadguru Dham is. So you are correct about the place of the Sadguru Mandal. Uh, but but the point is, uh, like Swamiji has mentioned in Swarved, मर कर फिर मरना नहीं ऐसा मरण सुहाय. So what a Sadguru does when a Buddha soul practice under the shelter of Sadguru, Sadguru removes the reason behind falling down, right? What is the reason behind falling down? Your ignorance, right? So when a soul practice the spiritual journey under the shelter of Sadguru, and when it keep going up, so there is a state when the soul experience the same form of ignorance, where he experience aham brahmasmi, uh, you can say feeling, right? But at that moment, Sadguru is the one who appears in front of the soul, and then he clarifies that you are not the reason behind this bliss. That reason is something else, and then further soul uplifts itself. So when your spiritual journey is happening, Sadguru appears there and clarify that ignorance. Why he appears there? Because your journey is under his shelter, right? But when you are falling, you are not in the shelter of Sadguru, right? You are in ignorance of yourself. So that is the difference. When you are falling, you are not under the shelter, under the guidance of Sadguru. You are in your own ignorance that you are the bliss, you are the source of bliss. And that's why it falls back. It's not that Sadguru is not present there, it is that the soul is not under the shelter of Sadguru. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dhanshuji. Yeah, that makes it clear.
Sudhanshuji, you explained everything very, very beautifully. One question I still have is you emphasize the ignorance all the time of the soul. I would like to know what's the source or origin of ignorance. If everything is bliss and freedom, where does the ignorance come from? Could you explain that?
Thank you very much, Hashmukhji. And as per Swarved and as per other spiritual scriptures, so the reason behind the ignorance is when a soul, you can say, when a soul is in its mukta state, right? When he is experiencing the bliss of Almighty, then the only reason behind that ignorance is when it start focusing on itself in place of Almighty. And that is the point when a soul experience that I am the reason behind the bliss. And that is the point of ignorance, you can say. In other word, to understand this, we can take it from the point like when a soul starts his spiritual journey. So I always try to understand it from the reverse way, right? When you are starting your journey from Baddha to Mukta, what happens, that explains me how you come back from Mukta to Baddha. So when your journey is going from Baddha to Mukta, so when we talk about the yoga, the journey of yoga, right? So in the journey of yoga, the end point is samadhi, right? So what is the state of samadhi? So Swamiji is mentioning there, when dhyata, dhya and dhyan, all three becomes one, that is the state of samadhi, right? What it means, that when there is no difference between soul and supreme soul, the union happens there in such a way that soul forgets itself, right? Then the samadhi state, it acquires the samadhi itself. So, so sorry, what my understanding is, maybe I am not correct, but what I have read and what my understanding is, the beginning of that ignorance may start when the soul start thinking about itself, not about supreme soul, right? When uh, like in the state of samadhi, soul forgets itself in the bliss of Almighty. But when reverse happen, when soul start when soul starts thinking about itself, then the point appears when a soul thinks that I am the reason behind this bliss. Until unless soul will think about itself, how he will think that I am the reason behind it? Because before that, there is no separation between soul and supreme soul. And I believe that is the reason from where, the ignorance starts, when soul have a experience of itself separate from the supreme soul. Then it start thinking about, okay, I am the one, and then I'm the reason behind this bliss. And then when I'm the reason behind this bliss, then let's see my own creation. And that's how it starts. That is my understanding. Thank you.
Thank you for that explanation. But as you said, initially, Almighty and Soul, they are one. There is always unity, but the soul thinks there is something other than that. We call it ajnan, like you said, the ignorance. So where does that come from? When everything was such a blissful state, Satchidananda, all of a sudden there is ignorance, and I don't know where as a Swarved explained somewhere, where does ignorance come from?
So, as per Swarved, what I have read, what I understand, the ignorance comes from as soul starts experiencing itself as a independent entity. Until unless it is dissolved with the Parampita Parameshwar, the ignorance is not there. So that is what I read in Swarved. If anyone want to add on it something different, please come forward. But that's what my understanding, that the reason of ignorance is uh, that soul start experiencing itself as the reason of bliss, because it's seeing itself different from the supreme soul.
धन्यवाद सदाशिव जी. I have one question. Like there is a saying, ignorance is bliss. And from that point of view, I think Almighty wants that the way the things are, like when a child is born, and then you are in the state of ignorance, and that's why you are playing with the toys, and then you are studying, and then you get a job. and that's how it works. I think Almighty wants that way. So uh, uh, where is the wrong? Everything is in perfect place.
Ji. Ji, Tejinder ji, thank you very
Yeah.
much. What my view on this is, Almighty never, wish anything wrong about anyone, any soul, right? Almighty He is a Karan Dayalu. What it means is, there is no reason which upsets him. He is always so merciful to the all souls, right? Now, whatever state we acquires, that is our own karmas, or that is our own effort, right? Even in the mukt state, definitely we are not performing the karma. But as I mentioned, soul has three basic properties, right? Gyan, Iksha, Prayatna, knowledge, desire, and effort, right? So based on his property, soul desires something and he put effort on that based on his own knowledge, right? Whatever knowledge the soul have. So Parampita Paramatma, the Almighty, is Karmadhyaksha. He is Drashta. What means he see everything. He don't interfere. He doesn't interfere, right? So based on his own free will, soul, acquire the ignorance, even so soul fall down, and even soul acquires body. But even throughout the journey, the if you say mm, the state of Paramatma is even the blissful. He is always blissful to the soul. But because of its own ignorance and because of its own karma, soul, even in the Bandha state, it uh, keep taking birth and death and keep doing his karma. But Almighty is always blissful. Almighty always give the blessings to the soul, and according to his karma, soul, go to the different states.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Ji. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I just wanted to add one more thing. So, and you briefly touched upon it, Sudhanshuji. The three properties of the soul: knowledge, desire, and effort, right? So the difference between supreme soul and soul is, how the knowledge level of knowledge is maintained. So in case of supreme soul, the knowledge stays constant. There is no uh, it is there is no, what do you say, wariness in the knowledge. It always remains constant. That's the state of Paramatma. But in case of soul, ordinary soul, the knowledge can change. And when the contrary knowledge occurs, the Aham Brahmasmi is a contrary knowledge. It is incorrect knowledge where soul thinks that it is a supreme soul. And because of that, then it, basically it is losing focus. The consciousness is not now fully united with supreme soul. There is there comes the distraction, and that's where the falling of the soul happens, because then, because of now two properties come into picture, right? So the knowledge has degraded, and it has it can do efforts to experience something else. So because it is now not in union with supreme soul, it still has the desire to experience the bliss. And because now it cannot experience the, because of the contrary knowledge, it cannot experience the bliss from Paramatma. It now starts looking for that bliss somewhere else in the Prakriti, and that is how the degradation happens. So I think this was another thing. I think that would help us to understand why the degradation happens when there is bliss. There was eternal bliss, and why the soul falls down from there. It's because of the contrary knowledge and the ability to take effort. Those two things basically together leads to the fall. That is what I am, that is what I think. Please correct me if my understanding is wrong.
No, you're absolutely correct, Srirangji, and that's what my understanding is as well, and that's what I was saying. Like as soul, experiencing itself at that moment, the contrary knowledge appears, and there is a reason of that contrary reason. What I understands, because as per the knowledge, soul understands that soul has the property of eternality and consciousness, right? But at that moment, it experienced the third property, that is bliss. And the contrary knowledge that happens to the soul, that I am the reason of that bliss, right? And on that contrary knowledge, the desire which appears in soul, that I have to see the creation which I made. And to fulfill that desire, a soul put a effort and comes down from its pure state, and that's how it all starts. So I totally agree with you, Shriranji. Thank you very much.
जय सदगुरुदेव। एक और प्रश्न था, बहुत अच्छा डिस्कशन था ये, पतन कैसे होती है एक आत्मा की। एक प्रश्न ये था कि जब हम सुषुप्ति अवस्था में रहते हैं तो उसको तमोगुण से रचित क्यों बोलते हैं? क्योंकि जब हम वापस जब जागृत होते हैं तो थोड़ा अनुभव होता है कि बहुत बढ़िया नींद आया, बहुत बढ़िया सोए, तो उस तरह की एक फीलिंग तो आ ही जाती है, तो उसको तमोगुण क्यों बोलते हैं?
जी, thank you very much, Niranjan ji. So there is a reason behind saying this, as you are in the tamoguni state, and to understand that, we can take it like, what is the difference between these three states when we say that satogun state, rajogun state, and tamogun state? So when we talk about tamogun state, so tamogun state is a state when you are not in your consciousness, right? When you are not experiencing anything, then you are in the tamoguni state, right? And that is the reason when you are in the susupti avastha, then your you can say all jnani indriya, those are not working. Why not working? Because mind is not there to interact with them, right? Where is mind? Mind is there from where it originates in your body, right? Where the soul is there, correct? So on that state, on susupti avastha, as your soul, as you are not experiencing anything outside, because mind is not there and mind is not interacting with your sensory organs, so you are in the state where you are not experiencing anything, right? It is the similar state what happens in the tamogun, right? You are in tamogun, you don't experience anything, correct? Now the question, so that is the reason you can say it in the tamogun state. Tamoguns means, tam means andhera, it means the darkness, right? Darkness means, you can say, the state where the experience is zero, where the knowledge is zero, where the information is zero, correct? That means the darkness here. So darkness means, you can say, there is no light. Light means knowledge. Light doesn't only means the light, right? It means the experience. There is no experience, right? So that is the reason that we say that on that state, a soul, we are in the tamogun state. Now the second part which you mentioned, that when you wake up, you say that you are feeling very good, you are experiencing very good, and there is a reason for that. What is the reason for that? The reason for that is, during that duration, there is no deviation within yourself, right? You have not, you can say that you have not gone on different subjects. Your mind is, you can say, static at that particular point, right? So there is a difference between your mind is in the susupti avastha and your mind is quite in the state of meditation, right? There is a difference on both, but little bit the experience is, you can say that when you are in the ignorant state, when you are in the susupti avastha, you are experiencing the happiness because your mind was quiet, but it was quiet in the state of tamogun, in the state of ignorance. When the same thing happens in the state of meditation, then the bliss is different. So just because mind is not interacting, mind is quiet, you experience the happiness when you woke up from the susupti avastha. So that is the thing. Thank you, Niranjan.
जी थैंक यू। और ये आपने सही बोला, क्योंकि मेडिटेशन जो है, we do the meditation, then you are, even though your mind is sthir, it is still, but you are aware. But in that case, you are actually not aware.
Right.
And so definitely that makes a difference. And except that with the meditation, you can go beyond that avastha. One can go above the sushupti, which is the turiya avastha, with the mahakaran shari, which is a possibility, but that is not a possibility because you are in the ignorant state, in the sushupti. Because I was thinking that if with the meditation one can actually evolve in the six with the Prati uprising, but you do have that progression even during the sleep, because you are Jagrat, then you are going into Swapna, and then you are also you are touching the third state, which is Sushupti, but unfortunately you are in the ignorant state, so you're pretty much bound there. You cannot go any further. And gee, that explains it. And one thing I think we had briefly touched about last time is that when we talk about Trikal Darshi, then one is that one can see the past, the present, and the future. But Trikal Darshi probably also means that he can see all the six avastha of the particular soul, including the Swapna avastha and even the Sushupti avastha. So I was listening to a Mahapurush pravachan, and he was saying that if in the Swapna avastha, if you are seeing some divine entity interacting with you in the Swapna avastha, if it is not divine entity, if it is some friend, family, neighbor, or colleague and all that, then ignore all of that, because that's not that is just a reflection in your mind from impression in your mind. But if some Mahapurush or your Ishta appears in your in that impression, then it could be very different thing, because they are Trikaldarshi. They are present even in that state. So and there's a reason why they may have appeared, and see that as something different than the typical swapna. So would you have some insight into that?
Thank you, Niranjan ji. So whatever I have read in Swarved, and I heard from different speakers in the satsang, what my understanding is, so the Kal is above this Prakriti. You can say the zone of Kal. So entire Prakriti comes within Kal, right? But the Kal is not beyond that. So what my understanding is, a person is Trikal Darshi when his consciousness, when the level of his consciousness is beyond the Prakriti, right? When his consciousness is beyond Akshar, or at the mandal of Akshar, he is above the Kal. And when he is above the Kal, what I understand is he may travel on that dimension. Travel on that dimension means he can experience that dimension as well. Why? Because he is above that that the zone of Kal, right? So he have the privilege to go in the past and future or in the present. So that is my understanding, but maybe I'm not clear, but what I feel that there is few steps in between as well, right? Even if you are beyond Akshar, so there are levels between beyond Akshar and reaching to Paramakshar, Param Purush, right? So what the understanding says to me that on that state as well, you can experience the Trikaldarshi capacity, but it's not mandatory to be on the Hans state for that, because if you see the sixth state of soul, right? So the interaction with Prakriti happens in the Karan Sarir, right? But when you are going back through the meditation, so in other state, anything above Karan, you can experience that. That is my understanding. It could be wrong, but that's my understanding. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. So a lot of sansmarans that are part of some of the books, like the autobiography of Yogi, and I'm sure several other books where the guru, because of their Trikal Darshit quality, they actually appear in their Shis Swapna, and when they physically meet the Shis, and then they basically quiz them that do you remember that I gave you this thing, and then they eventually the Shis recognize, oh yeah, you were in that, oh yeah, okay, so that was you. So basically what so if somebody has that kind of a swapna where some divine, either Sadguru or some Isht that appears, then I guess what they're suggesting is, do not think of that as an ordinary swapna, because that is definitely they were there, and in that is their way of meeting meeting that particular soul in the dream, because sometimes we forget about the dreams, and we think that the dream is just it was just like impression in the mind of what we have read, what we have seen. So that seems like it applies for the physical world, physical people, materialistic aspect. But if the divine entity shows up, then it is something to ponder over, and also maybe progress our bhakti more deeper into that direction. So that was my kind of interpretation of when I was listening to that pravachan. So that's why I thought maybe. But thank you so much for that clarity. Yeah.
I just want to complete it with one Sansmaran. It will take 2 minutes only. So it is related to Sadguru Sadafal Dev Ji Maharaj and Prathamacharya Sri Dharmchandra Dev Ji Maharaj. So once Prathamacharya Dharmchand Dev Ji Maharaj was sitting in front of Sadguru Sadafal Dev Ji Maharaj, and in his thought, this question arises that is Sadguru Trikaldarshi, about Sadguru Sadafal Dev Ji Maharaj. So he was sitting in front of Sadafal Dev Ji Maharaj, and he experienced that thought. And at that moment, Sadguru Sadafal Dev Ji Maharaj mentioned to Swamiji, to Dharmchand Dev Ji Maharaj, that once I'll leave the body, then you will start translating the Swarved. I mean, not translating. You will start writing the explanation of each couplets of the Swarved, right? And you are writing for this couplet, and then you will write this, and then suddenly you will cut this, and you will write the next thing. So Swamiji has mentioned this, that after certain year, you are writing the explanation of one of the couplets, and when you write this, You are cutting that line and now you are writing the next, the correct form like this. And that Swamiji has mentioned. So once Swamiji left that body and Dharmchand Devji Maharaj, after certain year, he was writing the explanation of Swarved. So what happens that he was writing the explanation of that particular couplet, he write that one line and then he further cut that and he started writing the next one. And when he started writing the next one, then he remembered that I was discussing, I had this query in my heart, and Swamiji has mentioned it that time itself, that after certain year when you will write the explanation, you will cut it and write it further like this. So that explains, that answer the query of Dharmchand Devji Maharaj, that Sadguru is Trikaldarshi, because in the past itself, he saw that what I'm going to do, what mistake I will do, and how I will rectify that. So that is one of the sansmaran related to this. Thank you very much.
Gee, absolutely. Thank you. I think that is absolutely reinstates the. There's so many others that I recall actually that we had discussed during the trip to India, and absolutely.
Okay, so I think looking at time, I think we will move on. Smriti, I think you wanted to say something. I saw you came off of mute.
No, I was just wondering still, these four eternal tattvas we discussed, are they really separate, or what is why there are four different tattvas? Are they separate, or what's the explanation?
Ji, Hasmukh ji, I will definitely try to add 2 lines in this. So as per Sadgurudeo Bhagwan, as per the Swarved, these are the 4 eternal entity, eternal and conscious entity, which has its own existence. Now, the question definitely appears that why we have to understand it separately. And the reason behind that is when we talk about the ignorance within soul, right? So the ignorance, what was the ignorance? If we try to understand, there was an ignorance. So what was the ignorance? So ignorance was about the form of its own state, right? So when we talk about the knowledge, so Sadhguru gives the knowledge of exact state of each and every eternal entity. And why it is important? It is important because when you meditate, right? So before meditation, when we were talking about Almighty, so we said that the Swarup of Almighty, the form of Almighty is Prakash Swarup, right? In the form of light. But the question arises when you meditate, which light is the light of Almighty, right? When you start your meditation in the Prakriti itself, you will see the lights of Panch Tattva, right? You may confuse that this is the light of Almighty. When you further proceed ahead, you will see the light of mind, right? When you further proceed ahead, you will see the light of Akshar, you will see the light of soul, right? So there are so many entities, and those entities are in their Prakash form, right? So until unless we have the knowledge of all the entities, how you will know or how you will differentiate that this is not the end of your journey. There is something else left. And that's what happened. That Sadhguru, definitely in Swarved, this is mentioned theoretically, and we are understanding it as independent entities. But when we will meditate, Sadhguru will experience us that thing as well. That see, this is the light of mind. This is the light of soul. This is the light of Akshar. This is the light of Sadhguru. This is the light of Paramakshar. So knowing these entities is important, because until unless you will know it, you will not be able to understand that the light of Supreme Soul is further ahead. This is not the end of journey. Journey is still to go ahead. So that is what my understanding. Thank you.
So
Thank you.
yeah, and Hasmukhji, I would actually like to, again refer back to Swarved, because Swamiji has clearly written about, these six eternal entities. So it's the seventh Doha in Swarved, which says Nitya Anadi Shata Vastu hai inakara sabha vistara Rupa Guna Aru Karmaka Vyakhya Sakala Pasar. So Swamiji starts with this couplet, and then further he explains all six entities in detail, right? So here Swamiji has clearly mentioned that these are Nitya Anadi Shatvastu, right? Nitya means they are eternal. Anadi means there is no, there is no beginning for them, right? They're always there. So Swamiji has clarified that in this survey itself, that these are the eternal entities. They will never cease to exist. They will always be there. So they will have their existence, and which explains that, when soul unites with Supreme Soul, it is the union of the consciousness. It is not the dissolution of the Jivatma into Paramatma. It still has its own existence. It simply forgets its existence because the consciousness is now one with Supreme Soul, but it still exists as an entity. Okay, so yeah, go ahead, Smukji.
Thank you. Thank you.
I just wanted to add one thing. I know it's time almost, but real quick, maybe 1 minute. That I think Hashmukhji's question I used to ponder a lot actually, and it's very very valid question, because there are other. If you look at the other line of studies from the Srimad Bhagavatam, there is mention of um, um, two classification. Was one they call Swansh, the other is Vibhinansh. In the Swans, they call that tattva is ansh, exact ansh of Paramatma, and the other tattva is Vibhinansh. It is not part of. It is not an ansh of Paramatma. So the real relationship of the Vibhinansh is it has the Jeev Shakti of the Paramatma. So the actual relationship of the soul is dasatva. So the soul, so in general term, basically हम आत्मा जो है, we are अंश of परमात्मा. In general speaking terms, लोग बोल देते हैं कि हम परमात्मा के अंश हैं. But they describe, if you in further detail, that the actual relationship is that the soul is independent, but it gets its energy, Jeev Shakti, from the Paramatma, because the Paramatma provides three kinds of energy. One is Yog Maya Shakti, the other is Jeev Shakti, and the third one is Maha Maya Shakti. Yog Maya Shakti is his personal energy, which we call Shiva and Shakti. Shakti is the Yog Maya Shakti. And the other one is Maha Maya Shakti, which is the Maya, whose daughter is our Man. The Maha Maya Shakti is also the energy of the God. And the third one is the Jeev Shakti, which is also energy of the God. But these two are not actually Ansh of God. The Ansh is, call it Swansh. So this is how they have classified in a very detailed way. And then they talk about that when the Paramatma does the creation, then he does it in a separate pastime, which is called Mahavishnu. And from Mahavishnu, Ananta Brahmans are created during the creation. And then within each of the Brahman, he will have his Ansh, which is Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, and so on. So this is how the description goes. And so the way they describe it to understand is that there's a Paramatma, which is like in its full glory, and then he has a pastime like a karma bhumi of Mahakaran Vishnu, where he does all these pastimes of creation and administration and dissolution. And then he also one form of Paramatma, which is Shirodakshay Vishnu, who resides within each and every soul, within every Brahman. So this is how they describe it actually. And I have always been trying to kind of see how our four Chetan Tattvas fit into these categories. And I think that is still like an ongoing process. So I just wanted to kind of lay down. And I think Hasmukhji's question was probably in that direction also. So, like Sudhanshuji, you said, the ultimate answer is Anubhav. Once that experience happens, then all of these things become like ABCD kind of a question. And I think that's probably the very true aspect of it. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone. Really helpful and discussion. So looking at the time, we will move on to the next segment, which is Warriors of the Week. We all know that the Brahma Muhurat time, or the time between 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. is the best time to meditate. But all of us are not able to take advantage of that time. So to encourage all of us to meditate during the Brahma Muhurat time, NAIVY has started this initiative where NAIVY has created a group, a WhatsApp group. It is basically to motivate each other. In this group, once you meditate during a Brahma Muhurat time, you simply send a message done in the group. And that is it. You don't have to join any session. You just simply meditate on your own during that time. The goal of the group is to get as many people meditating in the Brahma Muhurat time. And we see that, slowly this list is increasing. And I think looks like we'll have to have 2 slides, soon, which is a good sign. So this is a proof that this motivation, motivating each other is definitely working. We see participation increasing in this Brahma Muhurat time meditation. So the warriors of the week are the disciples who meditated every day during the week. The warriors of the week are Amit Tawekar ji, Bhagwati Patel ji, Mukesh Kumar ji, Niranjan Kumar ji, Prachik Ksharsagar ji, Seema Singh ji. My name is also there. Surya Lumraju ji, Tejinder Sahadev ji, and Yogesh Ksharsagar ji. We also have inductees of the week. These are the disciples who meditated at least once in last week, 1 or more days. Somehow they probably could not, meditate all 7 days. But we see these names regularly on this slide, which means, and they also are in the Warriors of the Week most of the time. So it's very encouraging to see that people are, taking effort to meditate during this time. So the inductees of the week are Dave Miller ji, Geet ji, Lalmani ji, Monica ji, Radha ji, Rajkumar Gupta ji, Ranjani ji, Rashmi ji, Shriram Sahu ji, Shudhanshu Kumar ji, and Vijay ji. So thank you all of you for encouraging us to stay motivated and take advantage of this wonderful time of Brahma Muhurat meditation. So this now, we are now, have reached to the last phase of today's workshop. In this phase, we will be chanting a short version of Guru Vandana, Aarti, and Shanti Path. Vandana is the prayer through which we seek blessings of the Sadguru, and we request well-being and health, wealth, and seek his blessings for our spiritual knowledge. I will request Jessica ji to sing last 4 lines of Guru Vandana. Over to you, Jessica ji.
Sadgurudeo, Vandana. Prabhu Kalpa Santa Samaja Uttama Sarva Dharma Acharya He Jimmy Nadia Ashrita Sindhu Ki He Vishwapatha Maya Karya He Prabhu Satya Santa Samaja Tira Aparaksha Kijiye Jana Sada Phala Jnana Bhakti Riddhi Dina Dina Kijiye.
Thank you, Jessica ji. Our next prayer is Aarti. In this, we acknowledge the power of Almighty and pray that all disciples experience eternal joy, love, and freedom from the worries under His Holiness's guidance. I request everyone to stand up for the Aarti, and again request Jessica ji to sing last few lines of Aarti. Over to you, Jessica ji.
Aarti. Jai Gurudeva Hare Sadgurudeo Hare Shisha Jananake Sanse Shaname Dora Kare Doshanana Miyawe Satapata Pawe Mohamite Jivaka Sukha Shanti Vepawe Dukadamite Jagaka Guru Murati Gati Chandrama Sevaka Nayana Chakur Palaka Palaka Nirakatarahe Guru Murati Kiyo Shweta Shweta Maya Shweta He Shweta Shweta Maya Shweta Tina Pada Amrita Bara Shweta Mahanada Shweta Ashta Chakra Sabashunya Para Dara Ada Kepa Tahasada Fula Garakia Puli Pada Sansa.
Thank you, Jessica ji. So we all can now sit down for Shanti Path. Shanti Path is our last prayer for today. In Shanti Path, we chant for peace for everyone in this universe. May Sadgurudeo bless the entire cosmos with peace, love, and prosperity. I request Jessica ji again to sing the last few lines of Shanti Path.
Shanti Path. Hey Prabhu Shanti Swarupo Shanti Shanti Maya Shanti 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 Jana Shanti Ho Purna Shanti Maya Shanti Hey Prabhu Shanti Pradana Kara Duravaho Sarva Shanti Deva Sada Vala Shanti Maya Shanti Shanti Sukha Shanti Boli Sadgurudeo Bhagwan Ki Jai.
Thank you, Jessica ji, for singing the prayers in soulful and melodious voice. I also like to thank all of you for joining and making this satsang a success. Special thanks to Shudhanshu ji, Niranjan ji, Jessica ji, Asmuk ji, Tejinder ji for your active participation. So we will meet next week at the same time on the same Zoom link at 10:30 a.m. EST. Until then, have a wonderful day ahead and Jai Sadgurudev.